Welcome to Transformational Leadership in Transformational Times. This is a series of free webinars with top executives who are leading transformational change in themselves, their teams, and their organization. My name's Jeff Swanell, and I'm here today with my friend and colleague, Mark Vandeneind, the founder of Being at Full Potential. Looking at everyone on the participant list, I suspect that everyone here on this webinar has something really important in common, and that's a calling to bring the new and better into the world, to create change and to help others do the same. Although we may all be at different stages in our journey of becoming champions of change, I believe we all have a common experience, the tension between our higher calling of being a change agent and the challenges that we run into in making it happen. Certainly, COVID-19 brings its own unique challenges and maybe even some opportunities. This webinar series will unpack the stories of successful change in organizations that are different from our own, each with their own unique challenges and opportunities. Each webinar will provide you with hard-won learnings and, perhaps more importantly, give you the opportunity to ask your most pressing questions. You might even find that some of your questions only occur to you after you hear their stories. So stay tuned and remember to set reminders in your calendars for the upcoming webinars. All the executives featured in this series have heard and responding to the same higher calling, to be champions of change. They've embarked on their own journey of personal transformation in order to lead others on theirs. In the first half of this first webinar, Mark is going to share his own transformational journey, in particular why and how he came to be a champion for change and the challenges he's encountered along the way. He'll also share what he's learned to deepen your understanding. I hope it inspires you to even greater commitment to your own calling. In the second half of this webinar, we're going to open it up to your questions and give you the opportunity to tell us what in particular you'd like to get out of the next 4 webinars so that these webinars realize their potential and create the most value for you. Please feel free to enter questions or comments in the chat as you go along. I'll be monitoring this activity while Mark responds to my questions. You can find the chat at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So, Mark, in keeping with our focus on the inner dimensions of change and transformation, would you please lead us in a brief recentering to connect us to our own inner transformational leader?
Yes, thanks, Jeff. I would love to do that. So before we jump in, I'll just ask everyone if you can, you probably already are in a comfortable space, and to just put aside anything that may be distracting for the next hour, just so you can become fully present and fully with us in this virtual space. Once you've done that, and once you can feel both your feet firmly on the ground, and perhaps you want to straighten your spine in the chair, just take a moment to bring your attention to your breath. And take a moment to connect inside to that transformational leader that already exists within you, that already lives within you. Just pay attention to where this transformational leader inside, where is it sitting? And what is it asking from you at this point in time? Maybe it already has a very clear direction, a clear voice, or maybe it's just a whisper or a seed that's been planted. Just take a moment to pay attention to that. Thank you. Jeff, we can.
Yeah, that was lovely, Mark. Thank you. So diving right in, Mark, why this particular webinar at this particular time?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So why are we doing this? Why the idea of transformational leaders in transformational times? One of the things that I personally have always been fascinated by is our relationship with the status quo. So until recently, I've noticed that there's like two camps. On the one hand, there are the people who believe the status quo is sustainable. So in other words, that the foundations, the underlying foundations are solid, and that all we need to do is to kind of find tweaks and improve here and there, kind of the incremental change approach. So that is one relationship that we may have with the status quo. The other relationship is the idea that the foundations are actually not so solid anymore. And that no matter what we do above the surface, no matter what tweaks we do, it's not going to fix anything. And that what we really need to do is look beneath the surface and start looking at what are those foundations and how do we work at that level. And what I've noticed over this last year since COVID has come into our lives and a lot of things have kind of been turned upside down, is that there are many, many more people who are opening up to this idea that actually the status quo is no longer sustainable. And opening up to the idea that if we want to move things forward, that we can no longer assume that the foundations are actually solid, and that we need to be looking and working at that level. One of the examples for me is when I look around and I look at the leaders and the government officials and the scientists and the academics and the stories they tell around what we need to do and where we need to go and how do we need to deal with this pandemic. It seems to me that there's just as much uncertainty there as there is uncertainty in our lives. So there is no longer kind of this solid foundation and this solid structure that we can look to and say, hey, what do we need to do? Tell us what we need to do. No, we're in this all together, and we need to find our way in this all together. So why is this important? Why is this idea of the status quo important? Is because I believe that that is the very first step in a change process or in a transformation process, is actually for us to be able to, no matter what the context is, whether it be our personal lives, whether it be in an organization, whether it be in society, is to actually be able to take a step back and to say, wait a minute, what is working and what has been working until now is actually not sufficient anymore. It's not working anymore. And that is a very vulnerable place to go. Because often our identity is associated with what has been working, with the status quo. And to be able to step back and to say, hey, wait a minute, everything that I believe to be true, or some of the things that I believe to be true, maybe aren't true anymore, right? And if that is the case, if some of the things that I believe to be true are no longer true, then there must be something else out there. There must be a new reality. And that new reality is not fully crystallized yet. We don't understand exactly what that is. So there's an unknown out there. And that requires us to, we can't rely on everything that we've known. So we need to now be able to work with the unknown. We need to become more comfortable navigating this space of not knowing. And I think that is the essence of transformational leadership. And I think we are now clearly in transformational times. I don't think there are a lot of people who argue that anymore. And we need to now step into our transformational leadership. And we do believe at being at full potential, and we firmly believe that all of us, every single one of us, has a transformational leader inside of us. And it's really just the extent to which we have listened to it, the extent to which we've acknowledged it, the extent to which we have allowed it to show us the way that is different. but we do believe that we all have that within us, and the time has come to start paying more attention to that. So that is the reason why we are here today. That gives some context on this webinar. And today I will be sharing a little bit of my journey as a transformational leader, or how I've become, how I've stepped into that role. And in the subsequent webinars over the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking with some of our leading clients, people who we have had the pleasure to work with over the last couple of years, for them to share their stories and how they've been able to navigate this uncertain space, and how they've been able to bring their ideas and their visions and their aspirations into the organizations that they work for.
Wow, that was very articulate, Mark. Thanks for that cogent and concise explanation. Talking about living into your transformational leadership and the transformational leader within, when did you first discover yours?
Yeah, well, I probably have to go. I need to go back to about 2005. I was halfway into a career as a market researcher for a large consumer goods company, and so I was a market researcher. I was responsible for understanding of the market and the consumers, and kind of bringing those insights back into the business. And one part of my job that I loved, that was kind of my favorite part of that job, was actually going out into the field and talking to people, talking to the consumers of the products that this company would manufacture, and understanding their relationship with those products, and understanding the context of their life, and how those products fit into their context of their life. And there was something about some, I guess, a skill or ability I had to make those people feel comfortable, and to build a bond of trust, and for them to open up, and for them to reveal much more than just the actual thoughts they had around the product, but they would reveal a lot more about who they are. And so a lot more depth was able to come to the surface. And then I would bring those insights back to the teams, to the business teams, and that would inform some of the innovation ideas that would come through. New products would be developed based on those insights, or new marketing campaigns would be developed. And I think that was something that I had a certain skill for, and it definitely helped to build the business. But at one point, I also realized that that there was a much greater way for me to put those skills of connecting and getting people to open up, and understanding the deeper layers of what's going on, that there was a much bigger lever for me to be working on to help the organization increase their performance. And that was the culture lever. So I realized that actually we can look outside for the answers, and look at the customers in the market for the answers, but we can also look inside and look at the people working within the company, and look at the culture, and realize that there is so much going on beneath the surface that we're not aware of, or that we don't pay attention to, but that are really the foundations of what can make an organization successful, what can make people thrive, what can make people come to life and realize their potential. And at the time, I didn't speak about it like that, but I realized that there was an aspect of the organization that was being, or that wasn't being given as much attention as other parts of the organization. And yeah, I guess I felt like there was a role for me to play there.
Okay. What did you do? What happened when you had that epiphany?
Well, I tried to reinvent my job, basically. So, and I was, fairly naive at the time, but I thought that I had, that I'd come across this huge insight, and that rather than being a market researcher, I could become this internal culture expert, or somebody who would help bring out the potential of the people within the company so that, we could make improvement in the employee engagement scores, so that we could bring out the creativity and make improvement on the innovation vector within the companies. And, I tried to make a case for that, but I was not very successful at sort of redefining my job internally. So I ended up stepping out because I was fully committed to bringing this deeper organizational work into the world. And if I wasn't able to do it at the time within that company, I figured I might as well step out and see if I can create something that can help organizations bring the focus more on that deeper aspect of culture. So that's basically in 2010 when I stepped out and Being at Full Potential was created.
But one of the first steps, as I understand it, in that journey was to create an assessment that would reveal these underlying or hidden dimensions that you were speaking of earlier.
That's right. So I came to the conclusion that this deeper aspect, it's very difficult to talk about it. It's very difficult to get people to understand it. It was living inside of me. I could feel it. I could feel it deep inside. I knew that there was something very powerful there, but I wasn't very effective at getting other people to understand it as well. And I realized that in order to do that, in order to make this intangible or this very subjective area of human being, in order to make it more tangible and more relevant and more accessible for people, there was a need to be able to structure it and to create a framework and to create a measurement tool, to create something which would help to bring this deeper layer to the surface so that it could become part of the conversation, part of the organizational conversation. And as it becomes part of the conversation, then people can start to look at and say, well, what actions can we take? Now that we understand this layer, this deeper layer better, what is it telling us? What do we need to do differently? How do we put in place certain programs in order to take steps forward? So this is when a huge kind of creative couple of years started. And together with my partner at the time, Sujit, we brought all our knowledge and all our understanding and all our insights that we had from our organizational careers together. And we said, what would it look like? What would these dimensions be? And how do we structure that? And then how would we measure that? How would we create a tool that could actually measure these things? And so what I'll do here is I'll just share briefly. This is really the tool, the main framework that we talk about. And as you can see, there's 23 different dimensions here. And the way we talk about it is that these are basic human qualities. So these are things that unite us. These are things that we all have the capacity for. And the idea is that the more we grow into these basic human qualities, the more we're going to experience a sense of fulfillment, an inner sense of fulfillment, an inner sense of meaning. And the more that we experience that, the more we're able to access and realize our full potential. So another way of looking at these dimensions is as muscles, right? So the question is, are we paying attention to these muscles? Are we building these muscles? To what extent are they alive or expressed in our life today? So for example, compassion, right? We all have the capacity to experience compassion, to experience empathy towards our colleagues. it's just that in some situations or in some context, that capacity is not being expressed as much as in other capacity, other situations. So this framework helps us. It's like a lens through which we can look at these deeper layers, and we can start to ask ourselves, how are we doing on this? Right? Are we doing really well? Are we highly expressed? Do we have all these elements in place, or are there opportunity areas for us to further work on, to further pay attention to?
So this is the idea of what gets measured gets done, I guess.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah,
what gets measured gets managed. Mm-hmm.
that's right.
And it's a way of making the subjective objective, or at least creating a perspective that enables these conversations around the various strengths and weaknesses to be discussed in the organization. And this is used at the level of individuals, teams, and organizations in total.
That's right. So
I had the opportunity to work with you at Teach for America, where a couple of years ago, we were there working at the team at the top level in the people, human capital area. And then last year at the whole 80 department human resources team for an 1,800 member organization. So it provides insights that wouldn't otherwise be available. That's,
exactly. Yeah.
and what do those insights lead to, Mark? What can you achieve with this?
So it really brings to the surface the things that are important. So it brings it kind of balances out the kinds of conversations that we're having in the organizational context. So we're very good at analyzing things. We're very good at getting things done. We're very good at planning, setting objectives, moving ahead, moving forward. And I think all of that absolutely is needed. But that's like 90% of the conversation today. And I think what is needed is we also need to be paying attention to what it is that makes us come alive, right? What is it that makes us feel engaged in our day-to-day work? What gives us a sense of meaning, right? And the more we can understand that, the more we can bring that to the surface, the more we can talk about it, the more we can start putting in place also the conditions for people to be able to realize more of their potential.
And we'll be hearing about how that's applied in 4 upcoming webinars.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really fascinating, and I know there's much more depth to the frameworks and methodology that being at full potential brings to organizational and team potential. But where do you go from here now that you've developed these tools, had the experience of working with some very high-profile clients?
Yeah, so it's a journey of the last 10 years, really, of coming to this point. And there have been many ups and downs, and this has not been a straight line by any means. But we have now, I think, come to a point where I can very confidently say that this original dream or idea or of that was there 10 years ago around bringing more of an attention to the being, bringing more of the depth alive in an organizational context, we've now proven that this is possible and that it can lead to incredible transformation. It can lead to incredible increases in how people experience their work and how they're able to achieve breakthroughs in their work, how they're able to achieve greater levels of satisfaction, of creativity, and ultimately of performance. So for me, when I look back, it really feels like something that many people thought was not going to be possible has now kind of been achieved. And I can say there's a proof of concept now. We have many case studies. We have many situations where we can look back and say, yes, this actually works. And now it feels like the time to accelerate this work, to take it to the next level, to be able to say, okay, how do we scale this up? How do we help other people who are feeling this desire to bring change and to bring transformation into the world, and who are feeling maybe kind of a bit stuck on how do we do this? How do I engage people who are just wanting to work with me at a very analytical level, and who are, again, are having a trouble to understanding what my ideas are about. So for me, the future is about supporting other change agents, and enabling them and working with them and partnering with them. And hopefully, this series of webinars is a way to kick that off. And through these stories, through the stories of these four organizational leaders that we're going to be talking to over the next couple of weeks, through
Great.
stories, I hope that we can inspire others and kind of create a movement here of accelerating change, accelerating transformation.
Can you tell me and the rest of the viewers about the people who will be speaking in these next 4 webinars?
Yes,
Just a snapshot.
a little peek preview. Yeah. So on Thursday, we have Andrew Thornton, who is the owner and the founder of a supermarket in North London called Thornton Budgeons. And they're an independent supermarket. And we have been working with them for the last couple of years. And the main area that they've been developing is self-leadership of the people working in the store. So they have put in place a program where they've empowered the people who are working on the shop floor to make decisions and to bring their creativity into the work, and not to get everything approved beforehand. So they've been really working on that area of self-leadership. And he'll be talking about how he did that and what are the results and the impact that he's seen in the performance of his store. So that's on Thursday. And then on Monday, the 30th of November, we have Laura Saldivar Luna, who is the Chief People Officer for Teach for America. And that is an NGO working in the education sector. And she has been a great champion of this work internally. So on her first day of that job, she invited us to come and to facilitate a workshop with her leadership team. And from there, we've done many other projects with them. And she will talk a little bit about, not so much also about the impact and the results that they've seen, but also about how she's been able to stay true to her ideas and her vision of how things can be in a situation where there's been a lot of pushback and in a pretty challenging environment, how she's been able to continue to stay connected to that vision inside of her, and how she's been able to find that inner resilience. Then on December 3rd, we'll be talking to Tanya Gonzalez, who is the executive director of a center called the Sacred Heart Center in Virginia. And she has been also a great champion, and she will share her story of human potential development work within that organization. And in particular, her angle there is to look at the interplay between personal development, so the focus on the I, and the collective development. So the focus on the we, and how these two things kind of connect and get synchronized. And then finally on December 7th, we have a dear friend from India, KS Saravanavan, who is the Vice President of Talent Development at a company called Omega Healthcare Management Systems. And they have been a real pioneer in bringing human potential development work all across the organization, and especially in the context of how do we optimize the composition of our teams. So how do we put people together based on not only their performance of the past years, but also what are they capable of in the future, so their potential. So they've used the outcome of the human potential assessment to further optimize their organizational structure and how they're set up. And they've seen some really great performance improvements in the organization. So he will come on and share with us what they did, how they did it, and what the impact that they have seen.
Sounds great. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to hearing Laura, of course, at Teach for America. I know that Thornton Budgeons was the organization where we did the case study. Being, an analytical type myself with a quantitative background, that was really compelling for me to find out that in different stores, you measured before and after, did a coaching intervention with their people and saw dramatic changes in business results. I haven't heard the details about the other two, so I'm really looking forward to finding out. Mark, is there anything else you want to add before we turn it over to the webinar participants here for questions?
No, I think it would be great to open up for some questions.
Sure. There is a question from Diane Smith. She asks, given these changing times, what are some of those new things we need to be open to learning about so that we can lead our people differently?
Great question.
That kind of goes back to your discussion at the beginning about the inner dimensions of change, and I think, doesn't it? Focusing on what's already within us and being able to reveal that, make it open and visible so that we can discuss it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the things that we need to be open to? The new things we need to be open to. For me, it's like there is this shift of where do we put our attention? And for me, the old is about putting our attention often on what divides us. So, I'm different. My skin is different than yours. My background is different than yours. My belief systems is different than yours. My country is different than yours. And I think where we're heading and where we can start to put more of our attention going forward is the things that unite us, what brings us together, what do we have in common? And we often talk about it as our shared humanity, and to bring more attention there and to open up and to explore, what do I have in common with you? What are the yearnings, right? The desires, the aspirations, the visions that we have that are similar. At what level do we connect with each other versus at what level do we disconnect from each other? I think that's what we're being called for these days.
Great answer, Mark. Thank you. Daniel asks, what feedback or advice can you share regarding how to engage leaders on survival mode with the discussion about deeper change?
Survival mode in relation to deeper change.
Yeah, I guess he's contrasting the two. Like COVID-19 has got people, sort of hunkered down and defensive and in survival mode. you know, the question, I'll read it again. What feedback or advice can you share? How to engage leaders who are, I think he means in survival mode, with the discussion about deeper change?
Mm.
Perhaps, is there a necessity for it? Is it sufficient to address the problems at hand?
Mm.
Maybe, Daniel, if you think of any clarification, you could write that in the chat too.
No, I think it's a great question, right? It's
Mhm.
we often think, I often assume that it's when I'm in a really good space and like everything is going fine, that I can start that I can then start to think about the big questions, right? And um, but actually, it's in moments of crisis that we need to start thinking about the big questions. But in moments of crisis, we tend to close down, right? We tend to shut down and to focus in on our survival. But that is really the moment when we need to open up. And so there's a tension there for sure. So I think that's part of the work that we need to do, is to create that space for reflection when we're feeling like there's no, when we are fully focused on the survival, is to be able to take that step back, to breathe into it, and to say, okay, this is not the end of the road. There's a wall here, but what's beyond the wall? There's something there beyond the wall. And to gently hold each other's hand to go there. Because I think it's a delicate thing. And the survival situations that we're facing are very real too. So to have compassion for that, and to have understanding, and to meet people where they're at, that's what's coming.
Right. There's a need to question the assumptions, for innovation, a need to support people at an unprecedented level. And it's like a burning platform. I mean, that's the opportunity, I guess, is the fact that people do appreciate the need for change. And if you can calm down enough, create psychological safety in groups to be able to discuss the undiscussable, speak to power, then you create an unprecedented opportunity for meaningful change. And that requires going deeper than you would have initially, using those sort of incremental approaches that you mentioned earlier, Mark.
Mm. Yeah. So
Natalie writes, it's not sustainable not to change.
yeah. Yeah, and I think what comes with survival mode as well is it's a little bit what we talked about at the very beginning, right? The status quo is not sustainable anymore. And so there is a breaking point, right? I think when we get into survival mode, there is a breaking point where we kind of crack open, and it's like an outpouring of the vulnerability. It's like I can't continue like this anymore, or it's not working anymore. And it's almost like that you come to a breakdown or a breaking point, but from there, in that crack, something new can start to open up. Right? We can start to look at ourselves first, but then look also at our situation, our context, through a new lens.
The cracks let the light come in.
But yeah.
Other questions, comments? Oh, Daniel writes, so I'll just read what he's written. I love the answer that for leaders in survival mode, we offer them safe spaces. It's in these safe spaces that they can welcome and embrace the emotions they are carrying and allow new ideas and energies to flow. Exactly. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah. I have a question for the group. What opportunities, in view of this discussion, have you seen that the current crisis due to COVID brings to people who want to foster, support, and sustain change in their organization? Mark, I don't know if you have anything that comes to mind in that regard, but if anybody else does, I'd appreciate it. Natalie says, can I repeat the question? I'm not sure if I can, Natalie. No, I can't. What opportunities has COVID brought for transformational leadership? I mentioned the idea of a burning platform. Mark mentioned the idea of cracks showing up in the system and that the status quo is no longer sustainable. Has anyone seen particular instances of changes in organizations that have resulted from COVID? You know, I'm sure, you know, we're all working at home. You know, this has accelerated the digitization of business models. There's some research that shows that people are even more productive when they work from home than they are at work. So I'd say that's an opportunity. Here's one from Diane. My org is realizing that this pandemic has opened up a lot of opportunities for us to support one another in new ways, to be more thoughtful with one another, to offer grace, to open up space to ask each other how we are doing first before we jump into the business. Just much more thoughtfulness in how we treat one another. And I think we will be able to build on this for the future. Wow, that's beautiful, Dan. Love it. Natalie, being concise, says creativity. You've seen creativity flourish, Natalie.
More thoughtful with one another, to offer more grace, open up space to ask each other how we are doing first before we jump into business. Yeah, that's a very forward-looking organization, it sounds like. Because I also hear a lot of stories of organizations further, you know, that the team spirit, for example, has gone down significantly since people are working from home, that they find it much more difficult to connect and to have the personal feeling as a consequence of working from home, because I think it becomes, you need to be much more deliberate, right? When you're sitting down in front of a Zoom, it's very easy to go straight into the agenda, into the business, and we don't tend to create space to actually make a connection with the individual as much as we would have if we would be in an office environment, and we would be able to more casually spend time with each other.
I don't know who wrote the comment that's purportedly from Jeff Swinnell to all attendees. It wasn't me, but I'm not sure how that happened. Maybe it's my inner transformational leader, my subconscious. Anyway, Diane has a further comment. We've also scheduled a 30-minute people leader check-in every other week, just for leaders to come together and talk about challenges they're facing and how we can support each other as leaders. Because as leaders, we are struggling too, but also have to show up in a certain way to offer support to our people. Yeah, I guess that probably wasn't happening before COVID. So in a way, that's a response that's also taking advantage of the situation to create something new. Doug McKechnie writes, my experience with coaching CEOs of companies in deep trouble is that the best way to lead people forward is to bring a team together to produce a specific, useful, concrete business result that demonstrates the CEO can walk the talk and build from there. Inspiration followed from this. People in survival need to see results before they trust the leaders' talk.
Wow.
Yeah, I like that, Doug. That's yeah, that's very smart and direct. I like that. You know, put your money where your mouth is. I mean, these people, these CEOs are leading, that you're speaking about, are leading strategic initiatives to make substantial changes in business results. And it's not the normal work that people are involved in. So if you can do that, more power to you. I think that's a very powerful way to go. And that's actually what we'll hear about from Thornton coming up next week, I guess, at Thornton Budgeons. What they did was they achieved some dramatic improvements in business results, and they contrasted it with a control group, a store that was about the same size in the same market, and the sales increased dramatically in the one store compared to the control group. Yeah, Doug McKechnie says it works every time. Kathleen, thanks for owning up to using my account here. Let me just keep going here. Harmon says, I personally have seen the importance of building resilience and take time for well-being in an NGO in the Philippines I've been supporting over the last few months. Having a dedicated moment every other week to take some time to wind down, share on a deeper level, explore some important dimensions like trust, gratitude, etc., and also create time for some fun, like online dancing. People really benefit from this simple yet powerful intervention.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Armin.
More people stepping up to lead.
Yeah, yeah. Which was the title page of your talk, right? I don't know if you want to share that, Mark, but that's everyone has the power to change the direction of an organization.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I think we have Jeff, is there anything else you would like to bring in for today?
No, just if there's any other questions in the audience, any questions that have just finally occurred to you at this point in time. We'll just wait a moment for anybody that might want to formulate their thinking, to write something down, and if not, then we can call it quits for the day.
Yeah, and you know, this is an experiment for us too. It's the first time that we're organizing a webinar like this, and so we're finding our way as well. And I think we would love to hear what would you love to see going forward in these subsequent calls that we're going to have with these organizational leaders. Is there anything in particular that you would like us to focus on? Is there anything in terms of the setup for this 1 hour which would work better than what we've experienced today? So any thoughts on that end? I'd love to hear as well.
Yeah, I'll just put my email address in the chat here, and if you want to take some time to think about that, feel free to send me an email in that regard, and I'll share it with Mark. Here's a question from Annalika. Do you have more suggestions on how we can support each other to really walk the talk? That's a pretty high-level question.
How we can support each other to really walk the talk. What comes up for you, Jeff?
Well, you know, I'm seeing a partial answer to that from I'm not sure from who. It's a comment that was made in the chat. In my experience, more people are stepping up to lead themselves and to support others, not waiting for traditional leaders for the answers, as you mentioned earlier, Mark. More people in my circle are learning new skills and daring to practice some things like breathing and movement before and during all these remote meetings. So there are some tactics, I guess, that would help people walk the talk to support each other. I think creating a safe space between people, focusing on relationships is where, you know, it has to start after you've looked internally at yourself. You can only do so much yourself. So asking for feedback, you know, deliberately taking initiative to foster stronger relationships with people, I think that's something that's fairly easy to do. It's simple to say, and it's not that difficult to reach out to people. And I think people that do that will be perceived as, you know, walking the talk. That's my suggestion.
Mm. Mm. So Harman, you're asking about the being entrepreneur. So indeed, this has been one of my projects, recent project is to step back and write about some of the lessons of these last 10 years of entrepreneurship, and realizing that there is a different kind of entrepreneurship that, or a different kind of path that I walked than the typical entrepreneurial journey, and calling it the being entrepreneur. So what key lessons, maybe just very briefly, what one lesson would I want to share right now? I think the one lesson I would share right now is how important it is that the greatest source of creativity and innovation has come from the biggest obstacles that have come on the path. So, you know, there's been many no's or many, you know, people who have not been able to grasp what it is that we were trying to do. And rather than that kind of be a discouragement for very long, or rather than me going back and trying and diluting what it is that we're doing and trying to create something that people do immediately understand, I think what most of the time I've been able to do is to transform that pushback into a source of creativity. So to be able to see it as an opportunity to further build the bridge that will help meet the audience that I want to be working with, to further meet them and to further be able to get them to the point where they can say, okay, now I understand it a little bit better. So it's always been a springboard for further development, further creativity, and bringing new things forward.
Daniel's written a response to Annalika's great question. Be brave. I'm wondering if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Have the courage to reach out to each other and also have the courage to walk alone. Know what you want to do and why. Get up and go. Be okay with pausing and changing direction and relaunching. Change or transition leaders need to hold the tensions of opposites, and that is included when we support each other. That is, being able to acknowledge the space between the collective and the individual, and be okay to return to each other also. Allow for change of our own minds with compassion and courage. Allow the same in each other.
Beautiful. have some great comments. Thank you, everyone, for engaging with us in this way. I know it would be nicer to hear all your voices, but the way we've been set up today is through chat. So thank you, everyone, for joining. We've come to the end of the hour here today. I hope you found it useful and interesting, and that we've been able to pique your interest for what lies ahead. I think those of you who join us in the subsequent calls, I think you will be really inspired by the stories of these great leaders, people who have been able to stay grounded in their visions and their inner aspirations, and have really found great creative ways to bring that to life in their organizations. So hopefully many of you will join us again on Thursday. And as we already said, if you have any suggestions on how to further optimize the way that we deliver these webinars, please do get in touch. Really happy to learn there too. Jeff, anything else on your end?
No, sir.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Really a pleasure to.
Always a pleasure, Mark. Yeah,
communicate with you.
I found it fascinating. I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed our interaction with you and the audience. Thanks, all you participants, for showing up. You helped make my day. Thanks a lot.
Bye, everyone.
Bye for now.